We're live.
We're live. Good morning. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Senate Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. We have a busy day today with a lot of things. We're going to start it right now with labor relations, and we're going to talk about H548, the introduction of it, and Representative Casey.
All right. Thanks very much, folks. It's great to be here this morning with y'all. I confess I don't really pass too many bills, so I don't get to come to the Senate too much. So this is a pure pleasure. But great. And actually, this one hasn't passed yet, so I should be careful.
You got to thank us after your test.
Yeah, right. So, thanks for having me today. I'll give a brief overview. Senator Clarkson asked me to come in and just sort of talk about the motivation of this bill. It may have changed a little bit while I wasn't looking in appropriations or something. So apologies if I'm inaccurate a bit, but 548, what it's going to do is create a state labor mediator, which would be housed underneath the Vermont Labor Relations Board. And what this position would do is offer free, neutral mediation when labor negotiations hit an impasse. That'd be for public and private sector unions. So how did this come up? Well, as you're paying attention to the national news, you probably have seen there's been a lot of federal cuts with DOGE and whatnot there. And one of the ones on the chopping block was a federal mediator that you may have actually had in this committee at some point or another. George Lavelle was the guy back in the day there he was a Rutland guy, was an AFSCME before. But they provided a really valuable service in having sort of a free mediator to help resolve these labor disputes. So when the positions were cut, negotiations really have a greater chance of stalling now. And when a contract hits an impasse, it's always good to bring a mediator in, suss it out there. But if you don't have that service, that could result in litigation, strikes, lockouts, or just long, expensive stalemates. And we're lucky in Vermont, you don't see too many like strikes or anything like that. But without a mediator at the table, you're looking at much higher potential for that. So if the federal government's not providing this, what I would call a very basic labor peace infrastructure, my thought is Vermont should. And why? Well, mediation is a lot cheaper than what you're facing with some of these long disputes here. And I should say, you have management and labor agreeing on this because, if you're like in some of these small towns, you might have a small local, but you also might have a very small town budget paying for mediation out of their pockets now. That could cost I don't know, some people are more familiar than me. I think like $4,000 a day, like pretty easy. That's a big hit to, small town, small workplace, or a small union. And I think we can all acknowledge, strikes are a bad thing. They're bad for workers. They're bad for employees. They're bad for the public too. It's always a last case scenario, and we want to try to stave that up as best possible. So a neutral third party is going to come in. They're going to help cool people down. They're going to solve problems. It's like that last bit of the contract, that last 10% of the contract. So it's really preventive maintenance. So it doesn't force agreements. It wouldn't weaken collective bargaining for either side there. And it doesn't take sides. It's neutral. But after the Trump cuts there, Vermont just lost a very basic thing that we had that we should restore. And it's someone just coming in, being the person who doesn't have any skin in the game, has some experience in this, says, have you tried that? Bring people into the hallways. Here's a proposal. So, for the cost of one position, I just felt it was a really good investment for us and would really help our small businesses, small towns, and unions save some money and avoid some of these. Because the other thing is the longer negotiations go on, you're getting a little more snarly with the other side too, right? It's just not good for long-term relations. And the mediator could really be a good peacekeeper, do some trust fall stuff like that. So that was the.
So previously, the mediator was provided through federal funding. The federal funding is gone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any history of the use of mediators in Vermont? In other words, to be able to quantify how much have we used mediators in passed in past years, and were they to be used under this formula here, what would it cost the state to do?
Oh,
Obviously, you've got the positions on a permanent basis, but
right.
frequently are they used, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I haven't done the analytics, but like, I've been in the labor movement a long time, and I've spoken to the federal mediators. I think it's usually double digits anyways. It's not going to be a ton. I mean, if you look at, I would say most negotiations can probably 80% plus can solve this without mediation, and a lot of these are mature contracts and they can come to the table, but it's going to be for like the 10% there that just can't get it over the finish line.
Now, you're envisioning here that the mediators would be contracted as opposed to employees, or are you envisioning them as permanent employees?
I could see it working either way, and that's where I probably should talk to my colleagues in appropriations to see what they're putting in the big bill for
Well,
that.
one thing that you wouldn't want to do is you wouldn't want to hire a full-time mediator and go 6 months, you have no cases to mediate.
Just pushing a pencil on the desk, right? So,
why would you have a person that you don't need, in effect, treated as a permanent employee when you don't have a permanent employment issue?
Right. And I was thinking it could go either way, Yeah.
Okay, great.
Just for clarity, so the concept is this mediator represents the state, could represent local governments, could represent all commercial interests in the state.
It would, they wouldn't be representing anybody, right? They'd be the neutral party. Yeah.
Person involved in the kinds of cases.
To represent all commercial parties in the state.
Well, they'd be working both for labor and management when they come in.
I get that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand the concept.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The mediator, again, represents two parties, but those two parties, the state is one, local municipalities is another.
Yep.
The third, potentially very big bucket is all commercial interests.
Exactly. Like,
So two commercial interests going against each other, or
nah.
okay, that's what.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm asking.
Sorry. I should have been more clear there. So it'd be like, if a business was negotiating a contract with their employees, right?
Right.
So it wouldn't be business. It would be business and their own employees there, and the mediator would suss that out. So
I do agree with Senator Brock that the utilization of mediators in the state would be a very helpful metric to understand if this is, to your point, whether it's a full-time employee or a contract.
and you're not going to see them doing like 50 of these a year. You're not, and that's where Senator Brock, you might be like having a contractor come in. It might be the right way to do it, depending on the need. I'll admit I struggled a little bit, like where to place this, because, you couldn't really place it in state government. But sure enough, like VSEA in the state use mediators sometimes, right? So, having the labor board was the most neutral sort of place where some of the stuff is sussed out anyways.
It's okay. Well, good. Well,
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
Hey, maybe I'll come down again someday, pass another bill. Who knows? Yeah.
That's one of the best bill presentations I've seen.
Thank you very much. Yeah. We'll see you later again. Yeah, take care.
Now, next you're going to have Ledge Council. Tell us what you call that. Okay, it's all yours.
Good morning, Sophie Zadatny from the Office of Legislative Counsel. Is it okay if I go ahead and share my screen?
Please.
So, this bill did change a little bit in general and housing from what Representative Casey was discussing. And this committee has actually already seen this before. This was originally part of S-173, and then this committee took it out. The bill that focuses now just on vocational rehabilitation originally included this piece in it. So what the changes that were made in general and housing, and let me just provide a little bit more background. So the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, that's the FMCS, that's the entity, the federal entity that was cut in the changes last year. And they went from 147 mediators down to 506. There's been litigation over that, and the FMCS is being rebuilt. The FMCS mediator that most commonly worked here in Vermont was let go last April, has taken another position. So even if it's rebuilt, we already will have lost that institutional knowledge that that individual had. The other piece is that as the FMCS is being rebuilt, its creation is under the National Labor Relations Act, and it's designed to address disputes and provide mediation service for entities that are covered by the National Labor Relations Act. Here in Vermont, we have 7 state labor relations acts. Those are not covered by the National Labor Relations Act. So it was really sort of the generosity, I suppose, of the FMCS that they provide mediation services free of charge to parties, state entities here in Vermont. So even if the FMCS is rebuilt, it's not clear that that would be a resource that would be available to the state in the future, again, for the state labor relations acts.
Now, the sense is that the object of this is to provide things in which it mentions public and private. So clarity is, would this then effectively extend the provision of free mediation services to people who did not get it when the federal mediators were around, and perhaps to some other things that may not involve state agencies? Is that a fair thing?
So the FMCS would have provided services to private because that's under the National Labor Relations Act, and they also were providing it to the state, folks covered by the State Labor Relations Act. So that's the Municipal Employees Labor Relations Act, the teachers, state employees, the University of Vermont and the Vermont State Colleges. So they were all receiving services from the FMCS before. So again, as Representative Casey said, the concept is that resource has gone away. The value of having a neutral third-party mediator it's a pretty small cost for the potential disruption to the system of not having that resource available. There was testimony in the House General of Housing regarding the cost. So there was a question about contracting out for this service, and mediators typically are charging $450 a day. So the thought is that actually it would be cheaper to have an in-house person. And you'll see if we switch over to the bill itself, was in terms of workload, was that was taken into account. So let me just run through this quickly. So this is just adding in again a position to employ a mediator to provide free mediation services to both public and private. So it wouldn't be limited just to our State Labor Relations Act contracts. And again, the private sector may have access to the FMCS if it gets rebuilt, but again, that's still kind of unclear. And then what this provides in subdivision 2 is if the mediator has capacity, the mediator may provide free mediation services to public and private sector collective bargaining units and employees on grievances and unfair labor practice charges. So right now, by state statute, you're required to go to mediation if you hit impasse during contract negotiations. So you have those different steps. And the first one is the parties hit an impasse. They typically, again, they resolve some issues. They can't resolve all of them. You have a mediator come in. The mediator then is typically able to either get the parties to resolve the situation, or can help winnow down. So now they've only got a couple of issues in dispute. And then currently you could then go to non-binding fact-finding, which again, the parties are paying for that. And then if that doesn't resolve it, then you're going to either the Labor Relations Board for last best offer, or you're going to a binding arbitration. So mediation is that sort of one of the steps in how we resolve impasses in negotiation. And that's required by state statute. It's not required that the parties use a mediator for grievances and unfair labor practice charges, but historically parties do sometimes use a mediator to help them get through that. So again, in anticipation of maybe if this was mediated, they wouldn't have a full load. The thought was that then they could assist in other ways. So, and there was some testimony that the executive director of the Vermont Labor Relations Board was asked specifically around how many issues go to a mediator. And typically what happens is the parties, if they hit an impasse, they provide notice of that to the Vermont Labor Relations Board, and they ask the VLRB to appoint a mediator. And typically the parties historically would agree, let's use the FMCS. So the parties would say, please appoint, this mediator from the FMCS, because again, the parties both found it really beneficial to work with the FMCS. The executive director didn't have that date at hand. There was some testimony from the Vermont State College system and I'm not going to remember the exact numbers, but it was something like they had 16 instances of negotiation over the past couple of years, and in 10 of those, they had gone to impasse and used a mediator.
So you're referring to the conversation upstairs?
Yes, in general and housing, yes. So again, there may be, maybe worth hearing from the executive director. She may have more information now in terms of the numbers. So again, one of the benefits of having a single mediator as opposed to contracting it out would be someone that really builds that expertise and knowledge of the particular contracts here in Vermont, the ones that are used all the time, rather than having somebody that is just not familiar with them. It just really helps. And again, if someone knows the parties, that was one of the big benefits with the FMCS, was they've really developed that deep knowledge of not only Vermont's labor relation laws, but also the parties themselves. So that helped expedite things because you didn't need to go through a whole education piece with the mediator. So one of the other issues that came up in general and housing was, of course, again, mediators are neutral. They're not on one side or the other. They're there to help negotiate between the parties. So it's very important that if this position were to be created and it were to be housed in the Vermont Labor Relations Board, that there be, a segregation of that person, so that they're not having access. The parties need to have faith and trust in the mediator and their neutrality, and that they're not biased one way or the other. And it's important that anything that's learned through a confidential mediation process be kept confidential, right? If parties believe that what they do in that mediation process is going to then be shared with the board members who might be making the ultimate decision, or with other staff in the Labor Relations Board, that's going to impair the credibility of the mediator. So this subdivision 3 was added to make sure that the board would develop policies and procedures to ensure that all confidential mediation information would be maintained separately and insulated from access by members of the board or other employees of the State Labor Relations Board, so as to protect the integrity of the mediation process. And then this is the appropriation request. This is currently in House Appropriations. I don't know what's going to happen with it. So again, the original request was for a full-time permanent classified mediator in the office of the VLRB. General and Housing added in a full-time permanent classified staff attorney position. As you may be aware, the Vermont Labor Relations Board has 2 staff. They have the executive director, and then they have a part-time clerk, and that's it. And they're administering 7 labor relations statutes. So there was an understanding in General and Housing that there was a real need for additional support for the executive director and the board. And so there was a recommendation to also include a staff attorney position. So in light of that, the request was for $250,000 for both of those positions for the salary.
What's the status for the and mediator?
This is the current request from, the House Committee on General and Housing that's currently pending in House Appropriations. I don't know what House Appropriations is going to do with that, whether they would support both positions, one position or no position.
Again, in terms of what we probably have, if we're board, if we're taking this up, we want to look at when a mediator has too many cases, what does that mediator do? And if a mediator has no cases, what does that person do, and how often does either situation happen based on history?
It'll be a little hard because there's no history, right? So again, that's going to be the issue, is how to balance that out. So again, that may be something, that would need to.
And then what happens when the mediator is on maternity leave or sick leave or vacation, whatever? How do we deal with that?
And the other issue that can come up is conflicts. I mean,
Yes.
there's, you know, again, there may be,
Certainly if they're doing private sector, nothing to do with state for them. And if we're doing private sector, does the state have an interest in paying for it?
right, so I think the primary focus would be on for the state contracts, and then if they had additional capacity, then maybe they could assist with the private, but, and again, at the time, this, and I have not gone back and looked at the most recent litigation, but at the time, again, the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service had been, I mean, like 95% cut. So a massive, massive cut. And I don't know where they're at right now in terms of rebuilding that.
Whether or not there's anybody back there who can provide us with history of costs, and like places been to do it.
Right,
Is there anybody in state government who maintains the records along those lines?
not that I'm aware of, because they wouldn't have any reason to be informing the state. I mean, if it's a,
Well, if the state were involved.
right,
somebody
then
would
the
at
Vermont
least
Labor
already
Relations
sign
Board
it.
would have any information relating to on the state side, but on the private side, I'm not sure who would be collecting or would have access to that information.
And in the event that this bill were not passed, presumably the state would have to come up with its own mediator from some place, of some cost.
Essentially, the parties would need to pay for the services, and again, the testimony in general and housing was, you know, that would run, you know, $450 an hour, and again, if you have travel and preparation time, it can get very expensive, in addition to which the parties already have to pay, you know, for arbitration and fact finding, so this was a valuable resource that has been there that is no longer there.
Was anything gotten from JFO? On any of this?
JFO did testify in front of House Appropriations, but the amount that's being sought is in here, so I don't think there was no additional information beyond the appropriation of what's being requested here.
So solar appropriations, do you know if there was any report done by JFO?
If there was, it was a very straightforward, this bill is seeking $250,000. There wasn't any of these other information, there's other information in it.
So at 250,000 and the two attorneys, there was no administrative support sought here.
No, that was an issue that came up from the executive director in terms of space. So it seems that the office currently has space to house them, but they don't have space for doing the mediations at the VLRB. But historically, they didn't happen at the VLRB any often. They would happen either on a neutral place, or either at the union's offices or at the employers' offices. So that didn't seem to be a big issue, but there will be, my understanding from the testimony of the executive director was that the Vermont Labor Relations Board does pay to the state, I think to BGS, sort of rent, you know, for the space that they're using. So that was raised as an issue, but the House committee just felt it was more important to just focus on getting these positions because
Yes, the one concern, positions always come with strings
right.
and computers and data servers, phone lines, and 250 for two lawyers. Seems a little on both sides. Do you consider the administrative support needed for this?
And it is a very lean operation at the LRB. Again, they've just got 1.5 positions at the current time.
Well, we can certainly look at what the House did and look at the testimony of the House. Anything else, though, just going through the bill, so that basically covered the.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, again, there was some testimony from, and I've got the list of folks that testified in general and housing. So again, the sponsor, we've already heard from Judith Dillon from Labor Relations, Julie Isbell, David Nickenberg, and then Patty Tony testified from the Vermont State College system, and then I testified. And then in House Appropriations, it was the reporter, Representative Krasnow, and then Patrick from Joint Fiscal Office testified as well.
Patrick Kidder.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think any questions? Great. Good. Then that does it. That was quick.
I told you it would be.
Well, I guess we do have time. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, I think we do, if we had the ability to get those people who wanted to, if we had the ability to get them in a few minutes early, that would probably be useful. Cover that.
It's just not tobacco or pot.
Yeah.
Tobacco or pot, I'm talking about.
Tobacco.
Traffic.
People are.
Yeah, remember at the end of the day, yesterday, the committee had some concerns on tobacco as to whether that, we should hear more testimony of that. Even any reconsideration, I'm reluctant, frankly, to do reconsideration. But this is the issue of some of those numbers were far apart from history.
May I? Yes, I'd love to get it, but Mr. Chairman, I bring what I see as 4 issues just to get our weeks up to speed. And
Yes,
okay.
please do.
All right, so there are 4 things on the tobacco bill, the pot bill, I want to leave separate that I think came up in finance yesterday that I think are worth discussing today. One, the fees. So the Commissioner Knight came in and spoke and just absolutely does not support $1,000. So if this committee, 3 of us, because Keisha's at the Senator Hinsdale is at the hearing, as well as if Senator Clarkson is not here. But if the 3 of us gave guidance to finance on what we think would be a better fee, I think would be useful for this afternoon. We could do a floor amendment, or alternatively, we could inform the finance discussion saying we took a straw poll. I
So
personally,
that is if we agree with it. I was want to give the opportunity to make a agree in the case, but recognize that we've already made a decision.
and that's that $1,000. So I fully support lowering it.
Yeah, first it's $100, which is what I ended up with. It is a huge deal.
There's another easy one that I think is not really relevant, the wholesaler fee, because that DLL is asking for that they need similar capacity to charge what they charge for alcohol, but they're transferring it over. So that I don't think is necessarily for us to wrestle with.
Finance would do.
Yeah. The pub laws, which I did send an email to you, it seems like we have some compromise language, which makes sense to basically unrepeal or not repeal the penalties for presenting a fake ID. So I believe Todd Nalos is going to speak to that. You saw it in the email. And then the 4th one is something that I bring forward, not endorsing, but I did CC you on this as well, Mr. Vice Chair. It's from the Lieutenant Governor's office. It has to do with a special type of tobacco used by hookah lounges, shisha. So okay, so there's some proposed language that I don't know what the implications of it are.
I don't know either.
Yeah. And I wanted to honor the request from the Lieutenant Governor's office to consider it. I did share it with Todd Nalos as well as Jen Carvey, and I'd love to hear their implications. Those were the things I was hoping
Yeah,
for.
I haven't looked at that. And I've already considered. So if we have time to do that, we could at least get them on the record right now. We have to take a couple minutes from the discussion today, later today or tomorrow, to get in some of the people who may shed additional opinion, whether it be somebody from the governor's office who was.
Regarding the fees, I'm really seeing 3 options percolate. One, we just keep it at exactly what it is, which was set in 2016, $150, so $100, $50 or $60 add-on. 2, we adjust for inflation, which JFO did calculate since 2016 would bring it to $162.
Who in JFO?
Ted Barnett in an email I can forward it to you. So he was ready to present, but we never called it forward. But if we adjusted for inflation in 2016,
Ready for present in finance. Yeah.
or 3, what many advocates was comparable with other states would be about $250 to $300 for those fees. I want the bill to get passed. And, I know I've said that I do want less people to sell tobacco in Vermont. I do, but at the same time, I don't want to penalize the local retailers and shops for the unbearable
fee tax and 10 times tax increase. So
Not
so
a good
everybody should go here. Number of concerns about the sun subdivisions. If it's going to go back to finance, it's better at least for us to have had the discussion of whether or not we'll act on it or do anything for information. I just right there in the question.
Jennifer's Carvey's on her way here right now. I reached out to Jill and Todd if I could be back with them, but we see our perspective. So if you want to do that.
And in terms of what one of the talking right here. Perfect. Jen, have a chair.
All right.
We're going to be talking briefly about the tobacco bill and some of the things, the issue regarding the effect of the tax of dollar increases, the tax increases associated with that. Had some discussions in finance committee yesterday. And we were asked by finance to just, if we have a chance to take a second look at this before they take that look at it. Okay. So, yeah, for the record.
Okay.
We're on- we're on-
Dan Carvey, Office of Legislative Counsel.
Well, as you know, we're gonna be talking about the tobacco bill, again, we've already talked about it. And the question is the, sharp increase in fees associated with some portions of this bill. And obviously some of the advocates, raised questions about the extent of it, the fairness of it, the issue of how well it compares with what others are doing and some of the policy associated with it. Senator Chittenden in particular has had some concerns expressed and one of you, so.
So I'd love to hear Senator Weeks' thoughts on what I'm hearing percolated in Senate Finance yesterday, which is, I just said this before you came in the room, but I see really three options. One, we keep these are the fees for the retailers at the $100, whatever it currently is, and the add-on fee. I see the second option as adjusting for inflation, which I have, I think, or JFO, which I think was like $163 and $83. And then two, which is comparable with other states, looking at what other states have, New York, Massachusetts, which would be about $250 and $300. I am ambivalent. I think we're making a lot of progress elsewhere in the bill, but I just want this to move forward. And I do want to put barriers in front of getting cigarettes, tobacco in front of people, but I simultaneously want rational and good policy that doesn't hurt the small retailers. So Senator Weeks, do you have any thoughts on this fee structure?
Yeah, so I appreciate the effort you guys did in finance committee. I do think that 1,000% increase on any kind of fee is more on the emotional scale than the pragmatic scale. And that's why I voted against the bill as it left committee. I think, something pragmatic, like either the inflation percentage gets one reasonable approach. The other is, well, what's the cost of doing business with, I guess it's a tobacco, or GLL, and whatever the agency is, they can justify, their fee, their services versus the fee, acceptable approach, something flat that's more reasonable, like a 50% increase or 100% increase, even just something that's just more than reasonable. Certainly acceptable. I support it.
At the same time, one of my concerns is had a committee vote on this, and we now have 3 members, a 5-member committee, making a decision. One of them voted no. Originally, I think it was a 4-0, as I recall, was a vote. But I want to make sure that we don't do something that in fact undermines the committee, the full committee's actions in terms of something we do offline. So I want to be very, very careful about that.
To that, Mr. Vice Chair, I also think we could frame this as a straw poll of our committee to inform the Senate Finance Committee amendments.
But making clear to them that this is a minority committee, unless we get Senator Clarkson, Ram Hensdale, and to this discussion.
I won't speak for them. I will just say a sense that there seems to be healthy ambivalence to the fee structure. So I haven't heard even one of them say that it has to be a concern.
Yeah, I think that's good. And so based on what you saw and what you did, you obviously participated in this in the other committee on the House side. And I wondered if there's anything that you could add to what you saw there that might help us in our decision making.
So you're talking about in the finance committee?
And
Right.
finance committee, you did not have involvement in the House.
It hasn't gone to the house yet.
That's
Right.
Yeah. Oh.
Um, I mean, I think you heard testimony yesterday with some examples from the Attorney General's office, examples of other states, and what their licensing fees are, and JFO had looked into some of those as well. I think, you know, one of the pieces of testimony that you may have already told Senator Weeks was that, the $1,000 was maybe an attention getter about increasing the fee more than a specific,
Yeah, but that attention span lasted all, you know, for half the session, so it made its impact.
Yeah.
So I think you have, I would discourage you from potentially using a number like 163. That just seems a little bit, it may be inflation adjusted, but to put $163 in statute and have that be the number,
Versus something round.
just a round number, yes. There's, you know, that's not scientific. It just stands out without some sort of an inflation mechanism.
Just forget for clarity, what we're talking about. Didn't we also divide the fees, and we have the original fee could have both liquor and tobacco, and the new scenario is two separate fees. So we have the original fee plus now we have another.
I don't know that those are separate fees, and I'm looking at just the way the existing statute is framed. There is the ability to get a combined license, but there do seem to be separate fees for the tobacco and tobacco substitute endorsement parts from the liquor.
But the separate fees in terms of increases was substantially different.
Right, I'm not sure what, and I'd have to look at what the fees are for the liquor license. But that is separate from these currently $110 tobacco license and $50 tobacco substitute endorsement.
I misspoke. So now I have the email from Ted Barnett, and it's not 163 recommended. He said 143 to inflation adjusted 30% since it was last set in 2016. So to get the conversation moving forward to I think 150 is something that is defensible at a round number, or 140. So I guess we don't like the threes. Fair enough. And then 65.
Probably more of a personal issue.
We don't.
And there's DD for Ted Barnett. He shows up. Since
You mention a name and the person appears.
Y'all have powers.
All right. So, yeah, is there anything else that you think we should know, frankly, as color commentary that we give to finance?
So if you could possibly propose or walk through the language that I think is coming forward with a lot of support, which is to not repeal that item C, which would be the PUP law regarding the fake IDs. So I'm sensing that Todd is going to come out in support of this as well. I don't know your official title. Is it Deputy Attorney General? Assistant Attorney General.
Kara, can I get login in or get the Zoom? Yeah, so I have proactively drafted a potential amendment. It is being reviewed by the editors right now, unless they have already reviewed it, but it is pretty straightforward. That is not on the fee piece.
Not to confuse the discussion, but there's a third piece of language that I've included you, Senator Brock, as well as Senator Clarkson. It's Jen on regarding this other request about shisha tobacco purchases that I don't know what the implications of it are, but if you
I'm not sure where it came from either. This was
Lieutenant
Governor
Governor
Governor's mentioned it, but whether it was originated in his office or elsewhere, I'm not sure. It's mentioned to me for the first time about 5 minutes before hearing this one.
and in hallway conversations, I'm told that might be best taken up in the house. So if we want to just
Yeah, you know,
want to do it today.
Are you sending me the Zoom link?
Oh, I just teams it to you, sorry. I
Oh,
emailed you as
okay.
well.
No, let me see if I can make that work. I've never got one by.
Just do it. I love it.
No. Thank you. I didn't
Ready?
think to look there.
Sorry, yeah. I was just what I had pulled up. I was like,
I know.
Are you okay?
Just telling Senate Health and Welfare yesterday that the Zoom era has made it much easier to explain the concept of telemedicine before we used to have to do a sort of lengthy.
That's as much as the pandemic had a lot of faults. It dragged us all kicking and screaming into the world of Zoom. No rush. Okay, do it.
I will put this on the screen. So I have made this from Senator Blank, so you can decide who would be sponsoring.
Like that, Senator Blake.
But this would amend this committee's report in section 1 in, which is that whole chapter, but by striking out section 1005 in its entirety and putting in a new version. So I've changed the heading a bit. This is the section that was fully crossed out, repealed in the bill as it passed out of this committee, removing the prohibition and penalties on purchase, use, and possession by minors. I'm putting it back in. I would amend the title of the section to say persons under 21 years of age misrepresenting age to purchase tobacco products penalty. And so it would still strike out the overall prohibition on possession, purchase, or attempting to purchase, but it would leave in language saying a person under 21 who misrepresents their age by presenting a false ID to purchase tobacco products, tobacco substitutes, or tobacco paraphernalia would be subject to a civil penalty of not more than $50 or provide up to 10 hours of community service or both. As I'm looking at it, we may want to add in language from the previous section that wasn't in here, but about the same manner as a traffic violation. I assume that is the
Same matter as a traffic violation.
it's like it's a ticket. It goes to the judicial bureau as opposed to somebody contesting it in the civil committee.
From the committee standpoint, from raising this after it's come through the committee with the recommendation, is this better either A, done by finance, if finance wants to do it, or B, referred to the House again as something that the House.
No, go ahead.
So, I think doing it in finance and the finance committee amendment, since I'm reporting the underlying bill and I'm going to volunteer to do a finance amendment, I think makes it logistically easiest.
I think that makes sense, and I don't think that we at best take something in committee and then rewrite a committee report.
I know it's a little muddy, but I disagree. I think that I appreciate the effort sincerely, but I think that if the hesitation is kind of emanated from the committee of jurisdiction, that we ought to take it as our responsibility and correct it on the floor with an amendment or whatever. You know, logistically, I understand it's much smoother. You take care of it in the finance committee, but it
But you
is,
could argue though as well that it's some members of the committee, as opposed to the entire committee, because the entire committee that voted on the bill was the members who voted on the original bill are not here to be able to put
Right.
it there. And I think that is probably as big an issue.
I'll support whatever path is necessary to.
Be just as fine with that. And I do think we have time because this is going to get out of finance today, and then it's going to go to approach tomorrow, and then so next week. So we can bring this up on Tuesday and have a committee amendment where all of our names are on it. Whoever wants to present it can be. So if you want to have it emanate from here, I think that's just as.
That would be my preference, but I don't want to stall this.
Okay. Yeah. Anything more that?
No, I don't think so. It sounds like hold on the language for now. With that, I've just added in that second sentence back up. And I'll be ready to push it from whatever source.
Mr. Vice Chair, just to honor my, would you show the Shisha language? Would it be okay for her to just show it's
Oh,
like
yes, I
one
think for us
sentence?
to, yes.
Do you have that at all?
Do I have I have the affected section, but I don't.
The affected section.
Okay. Sure. So I just to show you on this one, I'm proposing adding in an action under this subsection, just literally copy and paste the sentence from above down here.
Just to honor the request of the Lieutenant Governor's office to give it a thank for a quick hearing and then say, push it to the House to have them consider it. So, I'm talking too much this morning, Mr. Vice Chair, but when he brings Assistant Attorney General Delos up, if you wanted to also reflect on it, we had colleague conversations that I thought it might be useful. Yeah.
But, you know, at the same time, since we're limited number of folks here who are in the committee, and we haven't had a chance to discuss it with any we haven't had any other witnesses, I'm hesitant to take it up and put something in at this point. when it's gonna go to the House, you have a full hearing and then it'll come back, which is probably, I think, the proper way to do it.
All right, so this is I've now pulled up your committee amendment that you passed out of here, and also in section 1, because it was amending the whole section, whole chapter. We have internet sales, and under existing law, there's a prohibition on anyone causing cigarettes, roll your own tobacco, little cigars, snuff, tobacco substitutes, substances containing nicotine, or otherwise for use of the tobacco substitute, or tobacco paraphernalia, ordered or purchased by mail or through a computer network, telephonic network, or other electronic network, to be shipped to anyone other than a licensed, and then under current law, it says wholesale dealer or retail dealer in this state. And passed out of here, this would strike retail dealer. So it would all have to go through a wholesale dealer. And I think the suggestion had been take out or to restore the or retail dealer in this state.
And to add license. So, but I don't understand the
Well,
implications.
that's modifying, to me, that's modifying both, but yeah, we could add.
That's the ask, but I completely concur with you, Mr. Vice Chair. Want this to the House to have to consider.
I don't understand the linkage with Shisha.
So the argument, maybe if you want to bring him in, that I think I made,
Go ahead.
is that there are hookah lounges and some other cultural specific uses of a type of tobacco that they are not retailers, they are not wholesalers. They just need to buy that special type of tobacco. And with this law, they will not be able to buy that tobacco over the phone or even online. So it's looking for a carve out. But I do think if we take the language that's been proposed to me, it might nullify the intent here, which is to make it harder to buy tobacco online.
That's the point, but
I like the House figuring this thing out.
I do, in terms of trying to do things on fly, the concern is we're gonna miss something, or we're not gonna hear both the other side of the story of these issues, which the House will have time to do. But at the same time, in terms of the advocates, I've asked them to join us today for just a few minutes. We have until 10 o'clock, and we skip a break, but take 5 minutes before that. So, Jen, if you see that we just get copies of the proposals, if you will.
The language that I walked through that from Senator Blank. Yes, I will send that.
If you give it to me,
Yeah, exactly. I'll send that right now to Kara.
So if you consider at the same time, those are discussions with the House, my inclination is the House solve this.
Senator Blank's first name Scrivener.
Do you want people like to do that today?
And let's see, we're gonna have next, Lawson. Basic, come up, and I know you've been here before.
Speak first.
Whatever the chair, vice chair.
Joseph Hopkins, I'm representing the Coalition for Tobacco Free Vermont, and just wanted to weigh in on a couple of things. We do not support striking the retail dealer, the shisha component that you just put up. The reason that language exists right now is that we're trying to make sure that the tax on tobacco substitutes is applied equally and fairly, because remember that the tax is applied at the wholesale level. And so by making the wholesale dealer the only one that can buy online, we're ensuring that the tax is being paid. In the other part of the bill where you're studying having a tobacco tax stamp, that's also an effort because, as you know, the wholesale dealers buy the tobacco tax stamp for the cigarettes. So we know that tax is being applied. Right now, with this language, it's actually a loophole. And it in the online sales ban that allows the retailer to buy directly and potentially not pay tax. We don't know how that's happening. I would not want to guess at how that's happening, but this would make sure that the wholesale tax is being paid and that everyone is playing the same sandbox. And so we don't want to this language. Does that make sense?
If you want the language to continue to cover, but
Yes,
Yes.
the way that it passed out of
One-
here,
Limited.
Yeah.
The same way that it's limited in building.
Yeah.
Here.
yes. Any questions around that?
No, I think it's pretty clear. You have any questions? Thank you.
Do you want me to talk about what happened in Senate Finance yesterday and the potential around the licensing fees? Because I think that's an area of concern for,
Why see if is an area
uh,
take a couple minutes and just give your perspective.
yeah, so, I was not here, but I think someone had floated an idea of how much, about the licensing fees should be.
Did I state them again? The option?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah, you were dealing, you had the floor on that.
I really see three options before us, but four if you want to just keep the $1,000. But let's just take that one off the table. So one, we just keep what our current fees are, which is the 100, 5, 50, whatever they currently are, which is what I heard the commissioner of liquor and lottery advocate for, that the administration is not supporting increases. The second option, which I love to Ted Barnett, if you want to have him, Mr. Chair, is from an email that he gave me, which I misquoted twice, which would be to adjust for inflation, and adjusting for inflation from the email that I'm going to again quote would, since it was last sent in 2016, would bring the fee up to $143 and $63 or something. But Jen Carvey said she doesn't like threes, so that might be better at 140 or 150. And then the third option, which I could support any of these, I just think there's a lot of good stuff in this bill that I want to see it move forward. The third option would be to compare with regional states, which would be like New York, Massachusetts, and that would be arguably between $250 and $300. Those are the three options that I see before finance this afternoon. Feedback and testimony here.
And the origin of the $1,000 was mentioned to some extent. You want to?
So I heard Assistant Attorney General De La say yesterday in Senate Finance that the $1,000 was in some respects for shock value, just to highlight how it's very cheap and easy to sell cigarettes in this state, and it's harder to enforce and to monitor more and more stores. That being the case, that's why I do support the $1,000, but I'm a realist, and I don't think that's going to move forward. So that's why I like one of these three options that will move this bill along and get signed into law.
Yes, and I would say from the coalition's perspective, we also want that. We're not going to be a burden on the retail environment either. We can definitely get behind a reasonable license fee. I think
What's a reasonable license fee as you would divide it?
I think that the decoupling is the best thing. Vermont is the only state that has this alcohol with tobacco. And what we know is what was said in this committee was that we've got about 780 tobacco retailers. Only about 50 of them pay outright for the tobacco license. And so we feel like, I think to me, 150 sounds reasonable. If you're saying 150 for the tobacco license and then 150 for the enforcement. So because the enforcement is the add-on, say you can have the vapes, you can have all the tobacco substitutes, and that's what's really getting the kids to come in. And so we need to make sure that we have some deterrent even from selling those products. And that it's taken meaningfully, you know.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And
While we're in the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So fees was one issue that I struggled with. The second was the penalty. Penalty is 2,000%. That, that was one of three issues that caused me to not support the bill. And if the finance colleagues could take a look at that while you're doodling out the bill at some point.
So just for your information, Wendy Knight, the commissioner of the Department of Liquor and Lottery, was asked, and she did not have any issues. She didn't say that the penalties going up by that reminded that.
No, I think it's just got to make a jump like that. I know I put it back into the shock value category. Okay, get it. We'll do something, but 2,000% increase on penalty is in the shock value category, not in the pragmatic government that's taking a reasonable and effective. That's my.
Yeah, but at the same time, the shock value, I gather, is part of the discussion about what's the damage that's being caused, and should damage being caused be recognized in a way financially that it certainly doesn't reimburse the state for the increased costs that come with tobacco, but it does have an impact.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
I mean, my mantra is cost, right? Which you've heard 400.
And I recognize it, but I do think the fact that we're already taxing this commodity at what is 92%, would, you know, there's a balance. And I'm just saying that, 2,000% increase.
I know we need to move on. That did come up in finance, but I will, as an action item, maybe talk to Ted and otherwise, maybe just get an idea of how we calibrate those fees and how that compares to other penalties.
We do have a chart that we put in on the record on this that shows the regional fee comparison. And the only other thing that I'm not sure we want to talk about at all that came up yesterday was the online compliance investigator. And that is something that would actually help brick and mortar retail shops if we can catch the people that are illegally selling online.
Okay, thank you very much. Attorney General's office, I'll give you a minute and a half.
Sounds good. For the record, like Dave Reeves, Assistant Attorney General, kind of keep it about 10 words. We support the compromise measure on purchase use possession. And I think once you start using fake ID, that really does shift. That's what is happening to that individual. On fees point taken, maybe too much shock value. It took a little more air out of the room than we intended. We're comfortable with some of the more reasonable rates that have been suggested.
Such as 150.
We'd love to see
150 to 250.
yes, exactly that range, something closer to a regional quantity. And again, I think it's important that we don't want to harm the retailers per se, but we also do recognize like cost is a real. The digital cost is extremely high. We do want to create a little friction in that system. Again, supportive of the investigative position that's not necessarily germane here. And on the retail, I think Jill framed it very well. We think we would support a further conversation in the House on the shisha issue. And I think, relatedly, there's a rurality question there too about how rural retailers may be getting access to product and how successful that can be through retailers, through wholesalers, excuse me. And so there may be room here to look at that deeply, and we would support that conversation further if it comes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time.
Now, back on schedule. Take a look at rural finance.
And
And we're talking about 8775, introduction of that. Thank you.
Great. I've talked to, probably my email them back. Okay, so thanks.
Gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Some sort. There we go. More of us today. Mark. Talking about 8775, the introduction of 8775.
And Tom Charles Andrews, was the reporter of the bill and the co-author. Worked on it with me all summer, fall, and so welcome.
So we are going to be talking today about a bill which we haven't seen before. This is the first introduction. We're going to have Henry Wood, the legislative counsel, tell us what's in it. So
Great. So I won't take too much of your time. I'm Mark Mahaly, the record. Alice Plainfield, Marshfield, chair of the committee.
Tom Charlton, Athens Chester, Grafton, and Linden.
So this is very much of a bipartisan effort. What happened was, you remember last year we passed the housing bill. We all And in the bill was this new financing device called CHIPS. And what Tom who comes from Chester, which is not a big town, and of course my towns aren't big either. What we realized was that CHIPS was great and we hope it's successful, but that we really realized that it might have been a bit oversold when it comes to rural Vermont, really, that a lot of small projects that are small, the tax increment financing doesn't really work. And also a lot of towns just don't have the wherewithal to navigate, even though CHIPS has a reduced bureaucratic footprint, they don't have the wherewithal to navigate CHIPS. And so we just felt like we've got to really take a hard look at how we help housing in really rural Vermont. And this, what emerged is just a series, this is an omnibus bill. It's got 6 elements. They're all different from each other, and they're all aimed at making it easier to finance housing, particularly for Vermont. And so I'll just summarize them really quickly because you're going to get a walk through. One, and it went out of the House yesterday. One is a new process for infrastructure finance. And this really, the impetus in a lot of ways came from Michael Gahn of the Bond Bank, who's a great guy. Anyway, here's the deal. For small projects, very often a good way to finance a road or even a group septic, for example, is through an assessment district that's just the development area. And that assessment district then, over time, and then you issue bonds, the bonds pay for the infrastructure, and then the property owners pay back the assessments over time. There are really two different kinds. I hope I'm not telling you what you already know. There are two different kinds of bonds. One is what you call a GO bond, general obligation bond. And the deal there is, even though the bondholders are paid back by the assessments, what if they're not? What if for whatever reason something bad happens and the bondholders aren't made whole by the assessments? You're pledging the full faith and credit of the town to stand behind it. I mean, ultimately they can look, you have to tax if you have. Okay. They're a little less expensive. GO bonds are less expensive. The other kind of bond. Oh, and by the way, for that kind of bond in Vermont language right now, and for good reason, you need a vote of the town because you're putting the full faith and credit of the town. The other kind is what are called revenue bonds. And revenue bonds are used commonly in the United States, not so much in Vermont. Revenue bonds are bonds where you can only look, the bondholders can only look to the revenues from the assessment district. There is no pledge of the full faith and credit of the town. That's how a lot of projects are built in the United States. Yeah, they're a little more expensive for obvious reasons. I mean, a stadium is a classic example. You build those with a revenue bond. With revenue bonds, what this does is provide that if it's a revenue bond, then the vote is only the permission meeting is the property, period, not a vote of the town. That's step one. And that's been really backed by the bond bank and a lot of housing developers because there have unfortunately been instances where, I mean, you still need approval to set it up from the select board. But there have been instances where the select board approved a great project, but it needs let's call it group septic. Well, then some people in town who oppose the whole development because they don't want things to change, they used the bond vote to campaign against the project and the bond failed. So the project failed. So this says, well, that you can do that, but if it's a GO bond, but if it's a revenue bond, it's the people who are on the hook for the bond to come. Then there's I guess there's a really interesting modular and manufactured home accelerator. Tom, you want to talk about that?
Sure.
He worked on this.
The modular housing accelerator is built on several years of work that's already been done, built by the UCD, the HFA, Treasurer's Office. And it is, it sets up a means for the treasurer to, we'll talk about that in a minute, but the treasurer is back bulk purchase of offsite manufactured homes. This is where the cost savings comes in when dealing with offsite manufacturing, is when you're ordering the same thing. Oh,
This is section
this
4.
is,
You know what? By the way, I have a one pager. Can you scan?
Yes.
Why don't you just scan this? Just so they have it, you know, it's just kind of like summarize it. Okay.
so section 4 enables VHCD and buildings and general services to put together a bulk purchasing program where they can aggregate small orders from a number of different projects, order the bulk, back the bulk order, and pass on the bulk savings to the smaller developers and the smaller communities. I think that's the simplest way to put it.
Yeah, and another thing in the bill, which I'll get to in a minute, but you should know. Okay, so in other words, see the problem with rural Vermont, it's like 5 units. Somebody wants to build 5, that's a big project in a lot of towns. And if they make a 5-unit order to Huntington Homes, you know, that Huntington Homes might try to fit them in, but if we can aggregate and Huntington Homes has 40 units, they might even open a new line or, you know, dedicate their winter to this kind of stuff. And in fact, what we want is we want Huntington Homes to be able to get out of the trap of their seasonal drafts. We want them to be able to expand. But I was a little concerned that they might be skeptical of a bunch of aggregated little bitty orders. See, the beauty of it is the state is not going to pay for those orders. The developers pay. But are they reliable? So this bill has in it the permission for the treasurer to use up to 1% of their 10% for Vermont and get into that, to backstop that, to guarantee it as a credit facility of some sort. So that Huntington Homes, I'm just using that as an example, so they actually have the confidence to expand their production or do whatever they're doing because they know the state stands behind it. And I think the risk to the state is ridiculous. But okay. So then we have the VHIP program. You remember the VHIP program? But it's a reimbursement program. The landlord has to pay first. In other words, I'm going to put $80,000 into my apartment unit. I know I'm going to get 50. I get it back. I have to have access to the 8. I have to advance the money. Then I get paid back by the unit. This allows at the discretion of DHCD, they can front the money for a project that may not have, you know, maybe a little capital squeeze. So that's another thing. It lets them front the money. And I think they probably have that authority now, but they really wanted it to be more express. Another section is about VEDA, Vermont Economic Development Authority. You know, right now they finance. They're in the arena of financing commercial projects, but they really would like to do multifamily residential, but they can't under the law. So this allows them to move into that field. And again, you see, I'm trying to expand capital access to capital. What we're talking about. Speaking of access to capital, here's another part. You guys might be familiar with the treasurer's 10% for Vermont. Essentially, the idea is you take the state's cash balance. Actually, they don't take the whole cash balance. Right now, we have like a 1.5 billion in cash. you know, which we need some liquidity. But so the treasurer doesn't use 1.5 billion as a measure because he's really conservative. He uses 1.2 billion. And so 10% of that, under the 10% for a fund, can be lent out for housing and senior housing, for affordable housing at very low rates, very low rates. And it really makes the difference for a lot of reasons because, you know, our problem in Vermont is that affordability is so limited, you know, people can't afford to pay to buy $700,000 units. So to make it pencil, a developer has to keep the cost way down. And one of the major costs is interest on their construction loan and their takeout financing. And so low interest loans are very important. There are all kinds of projects that won't, good projects that won't pencil unless you have low, really low interest loan money in the capital stack. And so what they do is they issue an RFP, they get a bunch of responses, and then they pick one, two, and then they lend money out at they lend it through an intermediary like VITA or like VHFA. They lend it through them, but they lend the money to VHFA at like 1.5%. It depends on the terms, but it's really low interest. So we talked to the treasurer and their feeling was they could do more. And so this bill expands the 10% without changing the title of the program. It changes the 10% to 12.5%.
Oh, 0.5% for Vermont. That's
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds petty, actually. So, but the reality is that extra money is going to be available. And the treasurer testified, we had various people testify that he's really comfortable with this because the cash flow need, remember, you need liquidity. It's cash. You need liquidity. And so he feels like 10%, 12.5%, that's easy in terms of cash and liquidity. And then finally, the last piece has to do with housing targets. You want to take housing targets.
The last section addresses the housing targets that have already been communicated to municipalities and it asks them to incorporate that in their future land use plans. It also asks them if they are not able or feel that they're not able to meet those targets to communicate back to DCHD the reasons that they feel they might not be able to, whether they're regulatory or geographical or
Section 7.
And Section 7. This is, I don't know which version folks have the bill.
Did you have the version of the bill that just passed that?
3.1.
Okay, so it's been simplified by a ways and means amendment with a list of the criteria they want to hear
You
back.
want to look, when you look at, you guys, they should have in front of them on this section, they should have the way to
Okay.
because it's better.
So that allows us to aggregate some data as to what's challenging in the municipalities, the goals and can inform some decisions and adjustments as we go forward.
And this is important. This language came from VHCD. And then we worked with them, and then actually a better version came out and Ways and Means dropped it in. That's what I want you to see that.
But that's in this version.
Yeah, it's in there. It's just more complicated. It's too complex. It's
So there's
Ways and-
another version.
Well, Ways and Means amended it,
Yeah.
and you should look at it. I'll tell you right now, I'll tell you the difference in Ways and Means and us. It's very simple. But one is a better version of this. And the reason this is important is, remember how this worked. We have a statewide housing target. This was top down. A statewide housing target was disaggregated into counties or RPC, regional planning commission areas. Then the RPCs working with towns created targets by town. And those targets, they have a low and a high, and there's 2030 and 2050. Anyway, a lot of towns, when you talk to them, these are important. They tell you what a town would have to do if we really want to meet our housing targets. Okay? That's fine. But in Vermont, as you know, saying it in a statute or a regulation isn't any good if you don't socialize and find out whether it really works. And if you talk to a lot of towns, they'll tell you, I just don't know how we can do this. I think the most important part of this section is we say to them, yeah, put it in, next time you do a new plan, put it in your plan. But more importantly, if you can't, tell us why not. We need data back. We need to know, is it because your downtown area's in the floodplain and you can't build anywhere there? Is it because you don't have sewer and water? Exactly, what does that do to you? Is it a regulatory barrier? Is it, you're in tier 3 and shouldn't be, or I don't know, whatever it is, we want to know. And I think knowing is almost as important as the, as the numbers.
So we had similar language in our bill, and we heard from the the RTCs, Regional Development Corps. We revised it down. Did they weigh in with you?
Yeah, what Catherine Dimitri, her suggestion was maybe every town can't do this.
Yeah.
What we did was we just decided to support, we worked out with Ways and Means a very simplified version. We think anybody can do it. And frankly, we think it's important. I mean, like my town, I happen to know what's going on in my town because my wife's on the select board. I'm not, thank God. Anyway, it's a lot of towns haven't thought much about this. They just haven't gotten around to thinking about it. And I think it's important that they do think about it. But I don't think they should feel like it's being shoved down their throat. I think they should feel like what they have to do is tell us, can they do it or can't they do it? Just FYI, here's the difference between our bill that you have in front of you and as amended, how it passed out. 1, better language for this last one. 2, in our bill, the interest that the treasurer earns, he earns interest from all these loans. It comes to, it's $1 million a year. Now it could grow to 3. It goes to the general fund. We put it in a special fund for housing. And Ways and Means just took that out. Their Ways and Means feeling, and I think if they hadn't taken it out, probably approach would. It's just Ways and Means was thinking, don't make it automatic. It's appropriation. We want to appropriate that money for housing. We should decide to do that on an annual basis. Those are the big changes that they made. Which is my part is a pretty straightforward what it's trying to do.
Well, we'll hear the details.
Yeah. And
we'll let the council agree with what you said.
Of course. If he doesn't, no, he doesn't. I ought to know about it. If you need anything further from us, let us know. I'm going back upstairs.
Thank you very much. This looks interesting.
Are you, Cameron, are you going to talk both about this, the bill and the Ways and Means? Thank you. I always. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
For the record, Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. So the reason that I shared just the House General Report for this bill is because there's 4 documents. There's the House General Report, there's the Ways and Means Amendment, there's the Appropriations Amendment, and then there was a floor amendment. So as opposed to trying to give you all 4 documents and then walking through all of them individually, I figured I would share this with you. I can comment on the changes that have been made. They were mentioned, some of them here from the sponsors of the bill. I don't have a complete document because all of this was just agreed upon yesterday in the House. So that it's second reading in the House. The body did agree to all of the amendments that were proposed. And so it's up for third reading today. As soon as we get a clean copy back, be happy to share that with the committee. Also keep in mind that there are provisions in this bill that you have in your housing bill that you all passed just last Friday, S328. The municipal plans was one of them. So I will comment just generally on the fact that some of these are different as I walk through. But doing my best to keep you on time, I'm going to try to be relatively high level and succinct here. The first section is the special assessment bonds. The version that you have is as it was approved by the body yesterday. As mentioned, this is actually, I'll start off by saying this is John Gray's section, not mine. He wasn't able to join you this morning, so I'll just kind of highlight, echo what the sponsor said. As you all know, municipalities have the ability to set up, these special assessments as they exist now, and this would provide them the authority to do revenue bonds backed by the revenue of the special assessment. It doesn't require a vote of the entire town. So there's some detail here that I would let John walk through about what the bonds need to meet. They need to meet certain thresholds before they could be, approved or authored. But other than that, generally that's the concept here. The Vermont Housing Special Fund, so section 2, this is the beginning on the bottom of page 2. Okay, so you all have a similar provision in your bill. This is about the Local Investment Advisory Committee, state treasurers, 10% for Vermont. And so if you all remember in your bill, if you kept it more narrow, where you're increasing the cap from 10 to 12.5%. So it would be 12.5% for Vermont at that point. This bill goes a step further, and it's just the language here on page 3, the sub B. At one point, I think in your housing bill, we discussed this a little bit towards the beginning. So there's the increase to 12.5%, and then the treasurer's office is also asking for, I shouldn't say they were asking for, it was part of proposals that were being shared, an additional credit facility of up to 1% for the purchase of doing offsite, bulk purchasing of offsite constructed housing. But that the intention wasn't to then get a 13.5%. So anything they do within that 1% equally reduces the authority in the 12.5%. Again, I feel like this was part of your amendments in your housing bill and ultimately was removed. So that remains in 775 as it's going to come over to you. It does keep that 1% credit facility for purchasing of off-site constructed housing. The Ways and Means Committee did strip out the interest, and they did strip out the special funds. So part of this proposal that came out of House General, and at one point it was in the housing bill that you all were reviewing as well, allowed the treasurer to keep all of that interest, put it into a special fund. All that was stripped out in your bill that came out of your committee, and it was stripped out by the Ways and Means Committee in that house. So 775 has what you have, 12.5%, but it also has the 1% for purchasing of offsite constructed housing. So moving forward on to section 3 of the draft that you have in front of you, which is page 5. This is that special fund where the interest was going. That's gone.
Ask for clarification.
Yes.
So, page 3, paragraph, line 7, paragraph B. Where does it say that 1% is dedicated to off-site modular building construction?
They're on lines 12. So it's the credit facility established in the 1B may only be used, or maybe used only for that. Yes, sir. Okay, so we get to page 6. And so this has the Offsite Construction Accelerator Pilot Program. This was similar language that was in the housing bill that you all were reviewing. That's 328. Has ACCD working in this version, working with BGS to work with municipalities to try to come up with a pilot demonstration to utilize bulk purchasing of offsite constructed housing to then locate in that municipality. I know that Commissioner Farrell at one point earlier on in the session came in and testified on this pilot with you all. It was initially in one of the some of the housing bills that were proposed in the House and the Senate, from the administration this year. It has had some slight tweaks throughout, but you all stripped this out of your housing bill S 328 last week. So it's here in 775. And I know you've taken some testimony on it previously, but pilot program run through ACCD, intention to work with municipalities. And you can see kind of the appropriate language on page 7. Working with the state treasurer to try to identify the feasibility of the state providing a guarantee for facilitating bulk purchasing of housing. That's in sub C1. The House General Committee put in C2 to require that the treasurer consult with certain entities if they do offer funds for this program. Pilot occurs in one or more municipalities willing to participate. Municipality is eligible for grants for enacting necessary regulation reforms to site and build the housing. And there's a report in 2028 from the agency about the findings and recommendations from the pilot, whether or not to enact a statewide building code for offsite construction. One of the floor amendments that was approved was to add in an end date for the pilot. So what you don't see on section page 8 there at the end of this section is language that just says the agency shall cease the pilot project in June 30th of 2030. So on page 8, then you get to the changes for VHIP. As was mentioned by the sponsors, this is adding language that gives the department the explicit authority, they're on lines 15 through 17, explicit authority to advance funding at the beginning of a project. I would argue the department has the ability to do that now. The department testified that they would prefer to have explicit statutory authority directing that they can do that before they would be comfortable doing that. So that's what this does. Vermont Economic Development Authority, same language as in your bill, allowing that to fund multi-unit housing. So moving forward to municipal plan, section 7. Different language in your bill. There's a change to what you have in front of you that was as far as the Ways and Means Amendment. It really just kind of simplifies it and takes out some of the detail. So looking on page 11, sub 2A, which is real quick. So it takes out all of that extra level of information. So it would still need to include a quantification of the existing and projected needed housing types, but they wouldn't have to break it out by location, age, condition, occupancy required, et cetera. So it simplified a lot of the information, took that out. Yes, sir. But I would say, the language that came out of this committee was even further simplified down than what you have here. So there's a lot more detail in what is being proposed by the House versus what came out of this committee. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So yeah, that's where a good question point I have is if Ways and Means really heard the same testimony we heard from Catherine Demetric and others, and I at some point need to get on one side like we passed and what the Ways and Means. And if you want to reflect on how different or how close they are.
I would say that even though they're in the same ballpark, if you will, what you all passed is pretty significantly different in that. What you passed was adding it into the housing element piece, and it requires them to provide information on whether or not they're going to meet their housing targets and regulation physical constraints that may keep them from doing that. Then they have to include progress made if they do an amendment or a readoption. They need to include language on progress made to meeting their housing types. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple language, what you all proposed. What this is proposing is just similar, but more expansive in what would be required. So sub 1 year, municipality shall include with the housing elements, identification and an analysis of existing and projected housing needs for the projected population, added in, including housing needs for individuals with disability, and provide regulations that was struck, that piece right there was struck by Ways and Means. So they have to include the identification and analysis here. So I would say that's somewhat similar to what you have. But what's primarily different is what the House General proposed is this sub 2. If the municipality cannot meet the housing targets, then the municipality has to provide to the Department of Housing and Community Development an analysis of the regulatory and physical constraints preventing them from doing it. So you added that directly into the housing element. You said, tell us about how you're gonna meet your housing targets, or what are the constraints that are stopping you from meeting your housing targets? The House proposal is saying you need to include this analysis of how you're going to meet your housing targets. And if you're not going to meet your housing targets, you're not going to put that in your plan, then you need to tell DHCD why you're not going to, and you need to include all of this information.
We didn't have any of that. That's a big.
It was in your bill like initially, because this all started from the same place. I would say my understanding, and I don't mean to speak for external parties here, but my understanding is the version that you all have in your bill is the most recent positions of VLCT and the regional planners about what they would support or what they asked for. So they came in and testified to you all most recently. And so I would say what you have is the latest iteration of, yes, sir, of what they would like to see in the bill. I know that House General heard from them. House Ways and Means did not hear from them. House Ways and Means update was really, again, further refining the language down to take away some of the burden on the municipalities based on what was there. And it was at kind of the recommendation of the House General Committee at that point. House General put it out, goes to Ways and Means. They wanted to further refine it down after what had left their committee. So they asked Ways and Means to put that piece in. Ways and Means didn't take their own testimony from the regional planners or one about that piece specifically, I believe. So, okay, so I'd be happy to get you side by side so you can compare that section, because again, it's in your housing bill as to what is here.
Yeah, that would be helpful, I think.
Yes, yeah, a few sections. There's a few sections that are compared. So I'll kind of pull those out and put them in a document. And then there were some positions here, 2 positions within DHCD. If you remember, that's also in your bill. You had 3 positions. Here they have 2 positions. That was stripped out by the Appropriations Committee in the House. So that's the other
again with everything.
They stripped out, since Ways and Means was stripping out the interest from the treasurer, because that goes into the general fund now. They stripped that piece out. Appropriations only needed to strip out the positions. Presumably they would have stripped out the interest being kept as well. So that was the other bit there. So that's the again, there are, I'd say give or take, half of the sections of the bill you have in your housing bill that you all passed out, slightly different versions. So I'll get that comparison. Really the primary differences are the changes in VHIP, the revenue bonds at the beginning, and
I kind of like the revenue bond, but I'm curious why it wasn't a unanimous vote out of Ways and Means. So I'd like to know if they had concern with that, but that'll be a conversation.
I'm curious of all the bills that first read to us, that's part of this sessions, none of them have reduced staffing. I'm curious.
What universe?
okay.
Okay.
I'll work on that and give that to you. And other than that, whatever you
Take it to the next step.
yeah, if you guys move forward with it, happy to come back. And I would, if you want to move forward with the revenue bonds piece, you may want to have John Gray back to walk through with a little more detail about what that section does.
Yeah, that's going to be one of my questions. If it was whether or not there'd been anything done by JFO.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by the revenue bonds and when you said arenas, because that's something that's, I don't know how much we've been able or not able to pass those. Big John Gray's a rain.
The thing is obviously revenue bonds. School banking, people are not comfortable with revenue bonds, revenue's got there.
We're involved in just the strings.
Have a wonderful morning.
Thank you. It's a great day. See where we are at this point.
We're at a bit of an impasse. This Tucker is stuck in Senate Health and Welfare to the schedule from 10:15 to 10:30, but it's not yet started to speak yet because they are discussing S278.
I'll be there a while.
I can try to grab him right now, but otherwise.
Well, as I understand, yeah, he's there, and once you're there, it's very difficult to leave. let them know that we're ready for them as we need available. We could perhaps talk for a couple minutes about what we're gonna have over in finance today. Relative to these particular bills and how we're going to position the testimony that we heard. But do you have any thoughts, because you were on the floor talking about that at the time,
We have talking
after this additional testimony.
We're talking about tobacco now? Okay, so, yeah, because I'm reporting the bill too, so that's why I've been more talkative on this.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get my head around it. I think for Senate Finance this afternoon, we should propose is the lower fee. I'm liking 150, just because that's inflation adjusted. I think it's defensible.
Now, the question is 150 or whether I can go something like 250, which seems to be the prevailing amount from the other states, but 150 is probably more reasonable as far as tobacco suppliers here. Does it not have the effect that was intended, though, of perhaps some shock value? Well, $150 has to be shock value anywhere. Question. I don't believe it does.
To your very salient point, I'd hope that the original fee was established based on the cost of administration and that the 150 is inflation adjusted to today. I don't know if it was, but I'm not against.
When was the original fee done?
Well, I don't know about original, but the last time this fee was raised was 2016.
16. Yeah. And so you could always do a quick inflated look at what is 2016 dollars for $100. What's $100?
That came to the 143 figure, and that's what I'm at.
And 150 is pretty close to it. So the question is there any other reason to raise the fee other than adjusting for inflation? They want to have some value, shock value. I think for the shock themselves,
My sense is, particularly for shock, it's more targeted at committees. Get your attention, necessarily.
Not the recipient. Well, I don't know. I gather from the AG's point of view, got the attention of the public as far as they are concerned. Maybe the public who saw it being shocked by it. Good day.
Good morning, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Council. You should have in front of you draft 1.2 of Senator Clarkson's Form 278. And what the good senator asked me to do this morning was to cover the intent section that has been added per the committee's discussion earlier this week. So it's 3 sentences, fairly straightforward, covers each one of the components that the committee discussed. It states the first finding that medical and commercial cannabis industry has grown significantly in the US since the time that Vermont transitioned to a recreational cannabis market in 2022. Second, that recent statements from federal officials, including provisions of Executive Order 14370, titled Increasing Medical Marijuana and Video Research, indicated shifting federal posture on regulated cannabis markets. Accordingly, the intent of the General Assembly is to prepare for the possibility of regional or interstate cannabis markets by authorizing the governor to form agreements with other states that have. That's all that I have for you this morning. You went through the compact language earlier this week, and it's kind of interesting.
If I could fold Tucker into our earlier discussion, what I believe the trajectory of the committee is, I anticipate the majority, not even the majority, everybody to be on board with another amendment that I'm thinking might make sense to just fold into this as a committee floor amendment, and it has to do with restoring back the PUP law. So Todd Delos and Jen Carving's fully familiar. I'm thinking of tobacco. I am mixing up my smoking products.
Too many devices in the air at one time.
Yeah, okay, never mind. Sorry, please forget everything I just said, Tucker. Thinking of
You
tobacco.
lost me in PUP.
Yeah.
You need an amendment, but forget it.
That'll be, all right, so this will be a different format. My apologies.
Let's see, to be pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Any comment, committee members? Part of this.
Excellent. So what I'll do from here is there's a little bit of cleanup And I'll send a clean copy to Senator Clarkson, who I understand is going to serve in this committee.
Sorry about that.
We got 15 minutes to go and we're waiting for witness who we do not have.
We're great.
No, we are,
We're done. They were doing.
that's everything.
Was that it? Oh, okay. That's, you mentioned, you know, something's coming out.
Yep, that was.
That's done
covered.
early.
Efficiency.
That's
They're all
all
done.
Yeah.
We're done.
It's amazing.
See, we forgot.
It's over to get through security.
All right, everything's done.
Go off of-
Perfect.
There wasn't anything else you wanted us to take up, right?